big topics. And just before we get into that, I thought we could just do a quick round of introductions from everyone. So I'm super happy to kick off with that. So my name's Will. I'm the co-founder of Ocean Bottle. Our mission is super simple. It's to enable individuals all around the world to make a global impact on the ocean plastic crisis. So if I'm now going to go around the room, sort of anti-clockwise, from me, it would actually be Victoria, who is next.
First up. Hi everyone, I'm Victoria, the CEO and co-founder of a fashion rental platform based in London called HURR, H-U-R-R, for those not H-E-R. We run the UK's leading wardrobe rental platform where the majority of our business is peer-to-peer. So we're a tech-first platform allowing women all across the UK to rent and lend their wardrobes. And we have women making hundreds, if not thousands of pounds every month renting out their wardrobes. And we also power fashion rental for 65 fashion brands here in the UK. So everyone that I'm sure probably well-known names like Nanushka, Bash, the French retailer. We're also Selfridge's in-house rental partner too, which is really exciting. And I think the first time a big department store or a big name took a punt on rentals. So it's a really exciting space to be in, and looking forward to today's panel.
You may have to select, if you select the next person, that'd be awesome, going anti-clockwise and just pass on the baton.
Super. Well, I think sometimes the grid appears differently, but David's on my list.
Cool.
Okay, here we go. Hi everyone, I'm David Delport. I'm the global ambassador and product expert for Ren Clean Skincare. I've been with the brand for 15 or 16 years. We started the clean skincare movement, but I think even more importantly, we're going to be that zero waste cosmetic brand by the end of this year, end of 2021. So I'm here to talk about what sort of the journey to that point and some of the innovation that we've tapped into in order to achieve that goal in the kind of the luxury sector. And okay, up next, Wawa.
Hi everyone, my name is Wawa. I am currently calling in from Connecticut in the States, but I am actually usually based in Oxford. And I'm super excited to be able to share my perspective and share this virtual stage with so many people that are doing great work in the intersections of sustainability. I am a 22-year-old environmental justice advocate and current grad student, but on the side, I'm the founder of Black Girl Environmentalist, which essentially is a platform and organization for and by Black girls, Black women, and Black non-binary environmentalists, and exists for us to cultivate community in the environmental movement and assert and make sure that our narrative is included within the mainstream environmental space. So very excited to be here and excited for the conversation. And let's see. I
think it's just me now. Hi guys, my name is Mads. I am a tropical marine biologist, underwater photographer and filmmaker, and the director of Women in Ocean Science, which is a female advocacy organization for women in marine science. Yeah, I've been very lucky for the last few years to have worked and researched across the globe, and during my time traveling and working, I have seen the extent of the plastic pollution issue across the world and how pressing and widespread it is. And at the moment, I actually also work for a microplastics research company right here in London, doing digital content. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on the panel today, guys. I'm really excited to hear everyone's perspectives.
I think I should just add here that everyone has been super modest. We've got some pretty incredible people here today. So I actually saw, Wawa, you did a IG live with Mark Ruffalo recently, right? It was like, I watched it, it was incredible. Victoria, you got awarded Forbes 30 under 30 today, is that right?
Yes, this morning, 6 a.m.
Congratulations! Oh my gosh!
Yeah. So I mean, everyone is doing absolutely incredible stuff. So could not be more excited to have everyone here today. So yeah, we really wanted to talk about no bullshit sustainability. So I'll probably abbreviate that to NBS, which is what we say. for the run up to Earth Day this year. The expression actually came to us in one of our early meetings at Ocean Bottle when the team was really discussing what made us different. And I think what was really key was that rather than have impact as an added layer, we wanted to put it basically at the core of everything we did right from the get-go. So sort of whilst our mission is to help rid the world of ocean plastic, our mindset and really what drives our decision-making is no bullshit sustainability. And at Ocean Bottle, this campaign is really centered around the notion of disrupting the sustainability buzzword, which I think is really important, and to highlight the importance of action and promises. So without further ado, jumping on to the panel, I'm really keen to ask you guys, what does no bullshit sustainability mean to you, and why is it important? So I'm just going to kind of sort of dart around the room here, and just actually I'm going to ask Victoria and David a little bit extra as well at the end, just in terms of sort of from a brand perspective, what it means with you guys. But yeah, I don't know if someone's keen to kick off. Perhaps we'll go with Mads, since you were last.
Sure. God, what a loaded question this is. What is NBS? Well, I mean, to say something rather controversial off the bat, there is an argument to say that when you're looking at sustainability through the core of the no bullshit lens, sustainability and consumerism in this world that we work in and we live in at the moment aren't, entirely compatible. Sustainability literally means the ability to sustain or to maintain at a certain rate or level. So, when we're thinking of it in terms of business and in terms of consumerism and the way that we use, as you said, this buzzword at the moment, we often apply to brands and products. When we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about the effective management of our social and environmental demands in order to create long-term ongoing value from our resources without destroying them. So in terms of no bullshit sustainability, sorry, I keep swearing, but I'm not really sure if I'm supposed to say shit or not on the panel. For me, what does that mean to me? It means, actually living up to this, not promise, but, creating long-term ongoing value that is not at the expense of either the environment or of the communities that, are being exploited or are being used as a resource to create a product or to create a brand. And to put it very simply into kind of three things: one, having a top-down approach for making things more sustainable; two, business transparency. We need transparency right from the ground and the communities where products are being made, right through the supply chain up until it reaches the shelves or, it's at the top levels of a company. And we also need to make sure that there is infrastructure in place if we are trying to switch to more sustainable business models that ensure that people who were previously employed by unsustainable industry are supported going forward, or alternative mechanisms of income are in place. So for me, that is simply NBS.
Awesome. Cool. Should we go over to Wawa next?
Yeah, sure. Well, first, I love the term no bullshit sustainability. I've been saying it in my house the past couple of days, and my mom is like, okay, it looks like we're all going to be taking on this term. But I think that previous answer really does encompass what no bullshit sustainability looks like. What I'll add is that no bullshit sustainability really is getting to the core of what sustainability really means, right? Right now, environmentalism and environmental sustainability has definitely hit the mainstream in the past couple of years, which is really, really great. And at the same time, oftentimes you'll have folks that want to take advantage of the term sustainability without getting into the nitty-gritties of what it must be. And that is making sure that sustainability is constantly being achieved and worked towards from an environmental justice lens, a lens that understands that BIPOC and marginalized communities have been experiencing environmental degradation worse and worse for years, and as climate change continues to worsen, will continue to be at the forefront if we don't do anything about it. So as sustainability becomes a framework that is more widely accepted across different sectors. In achieving that, there needs to be tangible action being done to support the very communities that have been experiencing environmental degradation first and worse. So that is through, putting resources towards those communities, working with those communities, and making sure that they're a part of that framework of what sustainability has to be.
Amazing. That was such a great answer. And I suppose over to Victoria, and then perhaps David. From a brand perspective, I think perhaps relative to sort of the industries that you're working in might be quite interesting. So Victoria, to you, what does NBS mean within the fashion marketplace in particular, and also more specifically within rental platforms within fashion?
Sure. So the hard line of NBS for me is in the fashion sense, is buying nothing new, right? That's the ultimate goal. We don't need to create new things and use up our precious resources from the world. That's the hard line. The realistic view that I have and still have is that actually fast fashion, we're at a time where people are really starting to understand the environmental impact and social cost of fast fashion, but also it's not a judgment that we make in terms of, I don't feel it's my role to tell people what they can and can't do. People shop fast fashion for a variety of very well qualified reasons. My line is that you need to provide the consumer with an approach that is as cool, as quick, as fast, as competitive on price, and as fun, because fashion should be fun. The problem is this insatiable appetite for newness that we now have. There used to be in going back years ago, an autumn, winter, and a spring, summer, and fashion, and there were 2 collections. Now most fast fashion retailers are dropping 2 collections a week rather than a year. So there's just more clothing than there's ever been and than there ever needs to be. But my view is, rather than, we'll come on and I'm sure we'll talk about fast fashion in depth, but you need a solution to the consumer in the same way you need to say, don't buy a plastic water bottle, here's a solution and here's why it's better. That's where I see our responsibility as a brand. And to answer the second part of your question, which is a really interesting question about where the brands sit on this, as we've all said, there's a big kind of greenwash movement. What's sustainable, what's not? I'm a consumer, we're in the space. I find it incredibly confusing about what is sustainable, what's not, what do I care about? Is it labor rights? Is it plastics? All of these questions are really difficult. And I think what we're going to start to see over the next kind of months and years is a big divergence between businesses that are trying to look sustainable and be in that greenwashing space versus businesses like HURR that are inherently sustainable by their being. We don't make clothes, we don't manufacture clothes, we exist and we get out of bed every day to basically keep clothes in circulation that already exist and try and extend the lifespan of clothes. So I think that there's going to be a big kind of consumer awakening to the brands that are getting it right versus the brands that right now I think are confusing customers basically.
Amazing. Great answer as well, Victoria. So yeah, I suppose over to David then. And actually I've sort of an interesting announcement, I suppose, with Ren is one of the brands really leading the charge. And that by the end of 2021, Ren hopes to become completely zero waste in all of its packaging, which I think is fantastic because really, you're buying the skincare, you didn't come along to buy the packaging in the first place. So I think that's really awesome. But what does NBS mean to perhaps you and also to Ren?
I think it actually started like 20 years ago when we started the brand. We started a clean skincare movement, and part of that was kind of speaking out against words like natural and organic and how those, like our industry equivalent of greenwashing works. So we were kind of like, let's use the word clean. It's a nod to our desire to make things that are good for your skin and better for the planet and whatnot. We don't want to put a label on it that's super confusing. We've evolved a lot over the last 20 years. So to be zero waste by 2021 is, it's a huge project, but more than anything, it's about making real change. And actually the no bullshit for us has been about like committing to not shipping any products by the end of 2021. In fact, like if we don't hit certain product changes in the packaging, we're just going to delist them until we find a solution. It's about working with innovative packaging designs that no one else is doing because of the cost. So we absorb the cost because, 70% of the, cosmetic waste ends up in landfill. So as a manufacturer of these cosmetics, that is our starting point, and that's our responsibility, and a place where we can really make a difference. And I think what's important as well, talking about the luxury and a lot about what Victoria says as well, is consumers are going to buy our products. They want to feel good when they use our products. We still want people to feel good, but it's now we want to show that you can do that without compromising in any way. So you can have a Ren product that works, feels amazing, gives you that moment of happiness, but you can take this bottle and put it in your recycling and it will 100% be recycled because we've done that work for you. So a lot of it is about integrating technology, but taking a hit and actually just committing to a real goal, even if it means taking a hit. Like for us, it's always like planet before profit and all of that good stuff. But yeah, it's about taking risks. And I think showing other brands that it can be done. We know that us as a brand, we're not going to change the world necessarily, but now it's a really interesting space because people are looking at us for inspiration. And we're at a point now where we can share our technology and hopefully this ecosystem will just spread.
Amazing. Cool. I think there were just some fantastic points there from everyone, and I just couldn't agree really more with what everyone said. We need millions of people, or billions in fact, doing sustainability imperfectly, not just a handful doing it perfectly. I think just something to add from our perspective is really that sustainability doesn't just mean doing less damage and celebrating that. We really have to move a level beyond that. Sustainability is about creating positive impact. And like Mad said, when you really boil it down to the definition of sustainability, it's about ensuring that future generations have the resources that they need. I actually saw a really interesting, it's a pretty heavy lecture but for those of you who are really interested and keen, there was a lecture by Sir Partha Dasgupta, who is sort of an expert on biodiversity and actually putting a value on nature. And it was this LSE lecture on putting a value on nature, and it was just I thought it was absolutely incredible. So we'll definitely share the link afterwards. So moving on to the next topic, we've got loads of topics to whiz through. I think we're bang on time, which is not bad. If you want to have a swig of water in the meantime, then please do so. So yeah, we're now going to move on to ocean health and environmental action. And I think no conversation here is complete at Ocean Bottle really without talking about ocean health. We live on a blue planet. Every second breath of oxygen we take is from the ocean. It's the world's largest carbon sink. And not only is it the source of life on Earth, but it's also what sustains life on Earth. This might be I'm going to pose this question to the group, but I have a feeling Mads in particular might have some thoughts on this. And it's basically, has anyone seen Seaspiracy recently? And what are your thoughts?
I think I should actually jump in last because I have a very biased opinion. So I'd love to hear what everyone else on the panel has to say.
Cool. We'll leave the floor open then.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. I promise this weekend is my to-do list. That is absolutely up there. I feel like I'm probably the only person that hasn't seen it so far. I've seen lots of TikTok kind of what's wrong with it. So I think it's a hot topic, but I'll leave the experts to comment.
Well, Victoria, we'll ban you from this conversation then, and we'll leave it to the pros. But yeah, so I suppose Wawa, David, I don't know if you guys have any.
Sure. Okay, so I also have not seen it. I've read the reviews, but I also live with my partner who is a marine biologist as well, Mads, and a conservationist. He actually knows you. His name's Dr. Richard Smith. He's a seahorse specialist.
Oh.
So I think you might have someone in common that you've worked with or something like that, but he knows who you are. So actually, I'm very much clued up in the world of overfishing and trawling and dredging. We eat very, very sustainably at home. I think one of the points that we looked at was the facts and figures and how that was potentially skewed within the documentary. But essentially, I think because I'm so well versed in that world already, watching something like that is an additional bit of pain that personally I don't need right now, but I'm definitely working very, very hard to kind of look at where that industry is going wrong as well. I mean, I know that there's, like, if you look at the US, for example, take the size of this dredging in the ocean floor, it's like twice the size of the US every year, which is insane. Mads, you probably have a lot more sort of information on how that works, but it's so disruptive to, like, that's just one aspect that's so disruptive to an entire ecosystem on the sea floor. So there's, I mean, there's layers and layers and layers to this, but it's very bad news.
I also haven't seen the film. It's on my to-do list this weekend as well. But the only thing that I'll say from kind of witnessing a lot of folks in my circles talk about it, and also same with Victoria, I've been seeing mostly reactions on everything wrong with it. So I guess my comments would be super biased as well. But the only comment that I can really make is I've noticed a lot of the critique that has come out of this movie has also been in regards to the narrative, and particularly in the way that a lot of BIPOC communities often aren't given the opportunity to tell their stories on the big screen, and aren't necessarily, given the opportunity to put their films out on Netflix or whatever streaming platform. So I'd say something that I see in the environmental/sustainability space is oftentimes when it comes to letting audiences know about environmental degradation happening in these communities, it's often not from the lens of the communities themselves. So I think something that needs to happen is, as we really begin to intentionally embrace representation, we understand that it's not just the sexy fad to do to meet the moment, but it actually just is the right thing to do. People should have the right to be able to tell their stories, rather than have other people tell their stories from a lens that isn't necessarily grounded within the lived experiences and expertise that people have.
Yeah, I absolutely couldn't agree more. And I think the biggest problem, that Seaspiracy had as a documentary is that it followed a very singular narrative, and that, just happened to leave out 3 billion of the world's population, which is not inclusive at all. And don't get me started on the white saviorism that was going on. And as you say, the lack of BIPOC or Indigenous voices. And then not to mention that every person who wasn't a white person that was shown in the documentary was, if you put it in the goodies and baddies perspective, but it was, it was very disappointing for many of us for a number of reasons. But, and to kind of touch on, I know another question that's coming up is, how does a documentary like this on such a massive platform influence the perception of the general public? And I think that's really where the marine science community and the fisheries community is quite disgruntled by the film, because the documentary has a number of inaccuracies in there. Some would argue they're small. Some would argue, oh, you still used old data, so that's fine. There's a lot of hype going on. But, when we're looking at producing documentaries like this and we're putting them on platforms like Netflix, and we're not being inclusive and we're not representing the problem, we're using outdated literature, we're not including fisheries scientists to talk about a fisheries problem. And I mean, the list goes on. There's very aggressive interview techniques, and it really is following a clearly set agenda from the start. The issues that we have with this is that we then have a bunch of the general public having a very one-sided view about what is actually a very, very highly complex issue. And, like, as a scientist and as a scientific community, one of the things that we really struggle with is communicating research to the general public. So, like, to put it into perspective, a lot of science is locked away behind these paywalls, right? It's stuck in journals that even I can really struggle to access since leaving my master's degree, because my university access has taken that away from me. So, given that most science now that reaches the general public is either in the form of a press release that often isn't picked up by the news, or voluntary or unpaid outreach by scientists, a large proportion slips under this radar of the general public, and what you're left with is having an interesting paper or an outspoken scientist like me, or a documentary like this, or a big article that comes out and propels one scientific finding or a current issue in marine conservation into this mainstream media. But like where this gets really complicated is that, you know, for the majority of the general public, unlike David, who has like this background understanding of the issue and, you know, is very aware, this is the first time that they're hearing of this. It's like when you had Blue Planet 2, for example, that really propelled the plastics pollution issue into mainstream. It elicited a really, really powerful response, especially with the inception of social media. We were seeing a 53% increase in people surveyed in the US and the UK reducing their single-use plastic in the 12-month period following that one Blue Planet 2 issue. And this is now called the Attenborough effect. And, you know, this is the same kind of legacy that Seaspiracy will have. It will stop people from eating fish, especially in the Western world where we have this privilege, as people say, to give up fish. I personally don't eat commercially fished fish on an industrial scale because it's not sustainable. Yes, there were things that the film got right, but unfortunately it just blanketed everything. So now what we have is a range of armchair marine biologists who are calling from the back benches and saying, you know, all you marine biologists are wrong because I saw this movie and it said this, when, you know, it's not inclusive to many communities. It doesn't necessarily follow the current literature, and it is a bit misleading, and it's cherry-picked information to fit a narrative. And, you know, if we are cherry-picking science to then fit our own narrative, there's a quote from Professor, I think it was Malcolm Hudson, following Blue Planet 2, which said, if you remember, there's this episode, this scene with the baby whale, and they kind of infer that the baby whale died because of plastic pollution with no evidence at all. And Malcolm Hudson said, you know, make the case with evidence and not with the hype, because that's an example of, you know, storytellers bending what they've got to fit their narrative because they want people to create change, which is fair enough. And this is the tragic case for Seaspiracy. But, you know, it does represent the scale of the problem, and it will propel this into the mainstream. But, you know, it's that question, scientific rigor versus storytelling. Like, how much action do you want to be taken? You know, should there be some foundation, I guess, that we're springboarding from? Because this is, you know, a campaign that's going to be sprungboard from not necessarily the best scientific platform, and, you know, from a very not inclusive film. So, you know, at what cost? Sorry, I rambled on there, but
I thought it was a really, really good answer, and it is a really good question. You know, how do we balance, you know, that kind of factual accuracy with the need for awareness, and
exactly that.
and what's more important? I think probably both. Ideally, both in every situation. But look, I think that's a really strong segue onto our next topic, which is intersectionality, environmental justice, and the climate crisis. Which I think just runs as kind of a red thread through everything that we've spoken about so far. So this is a question for you, Wawa. I recently read an article that you wrote for Glamour, and I have a brilliant quote from it, which says that the issue with plastic is far greater than a marine debris problem. The truth is that the same throwaway culture that disposes of our planet disposes of people too, especially people of color. We don't have a plastic crisis, we have an environmental justice problem. You probably would have said the quote far better than I could have, but yeah, I'll pass on to you. But basically, my question is, with the rise of BLM, COVID disproportionately affecting BIPOC and marginalized communities, and also the climate crisis for that matter, how do we make the average consumer understand this is all interconnected with environmentalism?
Yeah, well, first, thank you for reading that article. I'd say the first things first is, I think oftentimes when we talk about like the average consumer, we talk about people sometimes without really validating the fact that people understand intersectionality, right? Even if it's not, you know, the baseline definition in theory that was constructed by Kimberly Crenshaw, like people understand what it means to have different identities. I mean, we all experience different parts of our lives differently in the culmination of the way that our identities intersect, right? I'm a woman, I'm a Black woman, I'm a student, I'm XYZ, and all of that together makes up my experience. And just because someone else may have one of my identities doesn't mean that their experience is the same. So I think people understand intersectionality within the framework of our lives. And it's really, I think, the responsibility of platforms, whether it's brands or companies, or just an influencer online who is trying to break down intersectional environmentalism. I think we have a responsibility just to connect the bridge with people, because people aren't coming to this issue with nothing, right? People understand intersectionality. I think right now, as you said, right, there's been this rise of conversation surrounding Black Lives Matter and the way that particularly Black and Brown communities around the world experience systematic racism, and of the same communities that are experiencing systematic racism from other venues are also experiencing right now COVID disproportionately. I think right now we're in a moment where a spotlight has been casted on segments of society that have been intentionally made invisible, right? And I think right now, as people are made more visible, unfortunately through say high mortality rates, there's a really, really great opportunity for us to say, hey, intersectionality and the multiplicities of somebody's identity, say as being a person of color and being low income and being at the forefront of COVID and the climate crisis, these are different ways for people to understand how, specifically with environmentalism, say with the climate crisis, how the same communities that are experiencing other forms of oppression will continue to experience other forms of oppression in other venues. So I think right now, as the spotlight continues to be put on folks that have been made invisible, there's more opportunity to make the connection. And I think also there's a huge opportunity, and we'll probably talk about this a little later on in some of the other questions, but I think there's a huge opportunity for platforms to team up with folks that are organizing within their communities and really work with people that already are working at the nexus of intersectional environmentalism, for instance, and giving them a platform to tell their stories so that people can actually hear from people themselves experiencing, say, COVID firsthand or the climate crisis firsthand. And I think getting those narratives from a first perspective and a first narrative also breaks it down a lot more.
I'd love to jump in there if that's okay, just on the back of that. I mean, I think this is so, so important. And, you know, it's something that I'm really grateful to the Black Lives Matter movement last year. I hadn't even heard of intersectional environmentalism until the BLM movement. And, you know, it's been really brilliant because it's kind of allowed me to verbalize something that I had seen in the field in Indonesia in the last few years. These people, these local communities who are living on the front lines of climate change, watching their home environments being degraded by, you know, actions that are being taken by people across the world. And it was, you know, really great for me to learn about this and for the first time to be able to put into words what I was seeing. And now I think it's so incredibly important to raise awareness about this, especially in light of COVID-19 as well, which obviously adds a completely another layer, because there's this very interesting paper that just came out. I think it was during the pandemic last year, which looked at COVID-19 and resilience within communities in Indonesia. And it was, you know, comparing the difference in having resilience to what they called a rupture, which was COVID-19 coming in for these communities who were, they were comparing luxury high-end tourism resorts, which are generally run by privileged foreigners from outside Indonesia, versus the local communities who have, you know, often been given the worst patches of reef that are left on the island, and then work on the resort where the reef is maintained beautifully because that's the only place they've invested the money. And so suddenly when you have this massive rupture come in, like COVID, and you remove any kind of financial capital that's coming in for these people, because they have so little natural capital there anyway, because their reefs are so degraded, when you also remove tourism and that financial security, yeah, it's a brilliant paper. So if anyone wants to read that, it's called Reimagining Resilience, COVID-19 and Marine Tourism in Indonesia. But yeah, it was really, really interesting, Wawa, to hear from you on that as well.
I think those are some absolutely fantastic answers, and I couldn't agree more. I think I was actually quite keen to ask Victoria and David, sort of from a brand perspective as well. I think while I mentioned it, you know, providing that platform, because I think the environmental movement has long excluded or failed to centre voices from the communities that are worst affected. So, are you guys seeing a change there? Are things improving? Are brands including this within sort of the core of what they're doing now?
Sure, I'll go quickly, Victoria. Sure, for us, we're all still learning as well, and you know, I'm getting an education in this too, and it's powerful, and you know, we're doing as much as we can. Mostly, it's about supporting these voices via our social media, which is one thing we can do very quickly and react quickly to. So working with some amazing talent like Toy Tsu, Daniel Sams, Michaela Loach, Green Girl Leah, Jay Hano, Dominique Drakeford, just working with them, supporting what their projects are, giving them platforms via things like Brand Share the Mic, bringing them into press events that we do, sort of creating this more holistic ecosystem around our products and what we are as a company, because you know, Ren doesn't only mean clean. Ren is actually like, it goes back to Confucius, where it's kind of like a meeting of two people, and the support and that feeling of support between people trying to achieve a common goal. And there's something in that I think is really beautiful. So for us, people have always been at the forefront of what we're trying to do. It's that relationship and that connection between people. And then from a product point of view, shamefully, it's only recently, like when we're doing MPD and we're creating new products, we're looking, how do those products work on different skin tones with different needs? Like, and that you know, this is a group that has been neglected for such a long time, to the point where I'm going to say, like, probably something that should stay between us and everyone watching. When you create a product like that's for sensitive skin, for example, and you need to do a clinical test on that product, you can't get results on black skin because no one's created a machine to test sensitivity on black skin. So this is like the level that we're unpicking, and we're pushing. We're going, why is this not happening? What can we do? We bring in experts. We bring in black experts. How do you want to be listened to, recognized? What do we need to do as a brand? And I think those are important, tiny little but very, very important steps, practical steps that we're taking as a brand. So it's like, it goes through everything for us in our communications, how we support people, how we learn from them, most importantly, and then also through to our products. And are we as we thought we were? You know, we thought Ren's for everyone's skin, it's great, it's for healthy skin, but then you realize suddenly, oh, maybe we're not speaking to the needs of some people too. And I think that's been a huge learning for us. We're not perfect, but we're working really, really hard to correct those past ignorances, shall I say.
Yeah, well, I think it feels like a sort of a tidal wave of change, but I think everyone needs to continue to just hold themselves accountable and you know, really measure that progress. So I don't know, Victoria, if you have anything to add as well.
Yeah, so David touched on something that I'd say is our kind of primary driver, and it's about mass education. So not talking from a HURR point of view, but talking about a fashion industry point of view more generally. The number one issue we have it is around garment workers. So it's not a direct HURR issue. We don't make and manufacture clothes, but within the industry, it's a huge issue. So there's always kind of one question that I ask, and the reality is, with minimal diversity in the industry, we need to actually start understand who is making our clothes and where our clothes are coming from. So for all the attendees that I'm looking at all their names now, and for the 5 or 4 panelists and me, every item on your back, do you know who made that item? Probably 90 of us would say we have no idea who made that item. Chances are, if it's a fast fashion item, it's probably made by someone who's not paid a fair living wage. So that for me is the number one question to ask. And I ask my friends this all the time, who still shop on the high street for valid reasons, and that they don't know, and they're not in this space, but they're trying to do better. And I say, you know, have you considered that the person that's making your beautiful dress, which looks stunning when you walk into a lovely curated store, and it's made in a sweatshop, it could be anywhere in the world. And I think that for me is like just the number one question to ask. You know, I have a kind of rule that I live by, where, you know, if I don't know who's made the item and I haven't asked and DM'd the hell out of a brand to find out who's making those clothes and where they're made and are they paid a fair living wage, and as much transparency as possible. I buy everything secondhand, and that is kind of how I live. And then I think from a kind of more her point of view, obviously the last year has been a massive time for change of us. We've always been very proactive in terms of elevating kind of voices within our community. We have a super diverse community of amazing women and men who rent day in, day out anyway. But one of the big shifts we made last year was to really start spotlighting more Black-owned brands. So 15% of our 65 brand partners now are Black-owned. We have some of the leading fashion brands, Kai Collective being one of them, the My, We Are Kin, in this space, renting their incredible collections from her. So it's small changes. Every time I see a cool fashion owned that's the brand that's Black owned, I'm like, let's get them on her. It's such an exciting time to be in this space and be offering rental to absolutely anyone who we think is going to rent. So but I think it's a wider industry problem, and I think if there's one thing I could take away, it's asking everyone who's looking to be better at fashion, do you know who's made that clothes, who's made your top, who's made your dress, who's made your hoodie? Well, because I'm sure most of us don't know, and I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, I think two really good points there, and actually that element of transparency, you know, it probably is the core reason why we find ourselves in the mess that we are in today in terms of the environment and also sort of social issues. So I think that is the big shift that we're going to see. I think consumers are demanding to know how their food was made, where the products that they bought was made, and I think the list goes on. So I think that really is a big part of it. And then secondly is representation, and actually for us as an impact company, trying to stop ocean plastic in coastal communities that are really suffering from the effects of plastic pollution and mismanaged plastic waste. You know, it's absolutely essential for us that we actually have leadership that represent those communities, so that we're really making the right decisions. So I think, yeah, this is a massively important topic. And really key to talk about. I don't know, Wawa, if there's anything else that you want to add, sort of off the back of everyone's comments.
Yeah, I'd say that in the past year, there's definitely been this transition that's happened, at least within my spheres and with my peers, of other, you know, Black climate activists and organizers that have been given the opportunity to, you know, be on large platforms and tell their stories. I do think there still is a lot of work that needs to be done. I think oftentimes what ends up happening with moments like this is that there's like very few set of like 5 or 10 voices that are designated as being the ones to talk about the intersections of racial justice and environmentalism. And I can even say, you know, maybe I'm one of those people that is often, you know, asked to talk about these things, and something that I know that I'm trying to do, and I think something that a lot of platforms and brands need to start doing, is to really start diversifying the voices that they are uplifting and working with, right? I think oftentimes with platforms like Instagram or TikTok or social media platforms that are really accessible, it's easy just to silo ourselves to, you know, the 10 voices that, you know, gained a lot of prominence in the past year. But there are a lot of people doing great climate, environmental work outside of the space, right? There's a lot of incredible organizing happening off screen. And I think it's the responsibility of large platforms and brands to start to really reach out, try to figure out who hasn't necessarily been getting the platform. Are we going to the same 5, 6, 7 people all the time to talk about these things? Are we diversifying the folks that we're talking to? And I think oftentimes, you know, there's levels to this, right? When we're talking about racial justice and its intersection with sustainability, environmentalism, are the folks that we're talking about actually at the forefront of the climate crisis? Are they at the forefront of environmental degradation, or are they not? You know, these are things that we need to be more intentional about. I'd also say that I, as the founder of Black Girl Environmentalist, we did Reclaiming Our Time, which is actually how I got in contact with Ocean Bottle, which is really, really awesome. And I think that was a great example of the Black Girl Environmentalist as an organization seeking out ourselves, folks that haven't always had a platform, and reaching out and collaborating with amazing people like Ocean Bottle, and connecting people authentically, people that may have not always been sought out for opportunities like that. And, for instance, Dana is an incredible environmental activist, and now she's tapped in with Ocean Bottle and is working with y'all in your ambassador program. So there's just a lot of opportunities, I think, out there for us to really diversify the voices that we're hearing from.
Yeah, amazing. That was just fantastic. Thank you so much. So yeah, I suppose onto the next topic of conversation, which is sort of back to consumers, and I suppose from consumerism to sustainability. So in a world where consumerism is first and consequences are second, how do we all share the responsibility of keeping our Earth sustainable? And I suppose, what role does consumerism play, or how do we end it? Another potential twist to that. And then one extra thing to add is, whose responsibility is it to ensure sustainable practices with our purchasing habits? Is it us as the consumers? Is it businesses? Or does this need to be enforced via policy? And I think this is something that we spend a lot of time talking about, so that systems change versus individual change, and really where the responsibility lies. You should be able to go to a shop and walk out the door without filling a tote bag with food wrapped in plastic. You should be able to order a meal without deforesting the Amazon. You should be able to have water without plastic. So I think it's a really interesting conversation. I think, Victoria, you might probably have a lot to say about this. I have a sneaky suspicion.
Not to wrap on.
Yeah, exactly. And whose responsibility is it? And what does that world look like? Moving from consumerism to sustainability?
Yes, so my view is that it is a three-pronged attack. It absolutely needs to be top down, but also bottom up. So yes, we need government legislation on fast fashion. We need any kind of form of legislation. Fashion is such an ungoverned industry, and that's why we, like you said, we're in the mess that we're in. But also we're not in the mood, or we haven't got time for a 5-year to 10-year policy to be drawn up over time. We've got a problem to solve right now. So let's leave the government aside. I'm sure someone else will tackle that. Let's talk about businesses and consumers. For me, there's a massive pressure on businesses to push a message to consumers around conscious consumerism. And that's where the question comes in, right? Can you get sustainability and growth hand in hand? And how can we do that consciously? So I think it's a business's responsibility to educate their audience that they don't need. And some of the biggest fast fashion retailers have said, we're actually going to try and move away from this, like, you'll die without this collection, this if you haven't got this mesh top, you're not going to be hot or cool this summer. Like, it's crazy. We need to move away from that messaging for sure. But I think the larger point on this is around conscious consumerism, and actually allowing a consumer to understand what that really means. What is conscious consumerism? And I think for me, it's about the idea of bringing back joyful consumption. So loving something, having it in our wardrobe for years to come, knowing that there's something in our industry called the 30 wears test. So never buy anything unless you can guarantee that you're going to wear it 30 times. Well, you'll probably wear that grey hoodie 30 times, a purple statement dress I probably wouldn't wear 30 times, so that's why I rent it, for example.
I actually have a hoodie I wear every day from 2010, and there's not much left of it.
Don't tell me it's got school leavers on the back as well. But
yeah, it probably does, yeah.
But I think, I'm talking about the predominantly female, the insatiable appetite for newness, where we live in a society that's fueled by social media, where everyone has to wear things once, take a photo and throw it away. Unfortunately, when we think about mass consumerism, that is where the customer is currently sitting. So I think it's a big education piece, but the long story short, we need three-pronged attack, has to be addressed at all levels. Government, there's a report on fixing fashion that went through and was subsequently rejected, that we're now lobbying, and I've been in a few governmental discussions about how we can solve this problem through platforms like HURR, looking at rental, looking at resale as part of like long-term how business should exist. But the answer is you need all of them to work, government, and then pushing conscious consumption from a business point of view, and allowing customers to actually understand what is conscious consumption, because that's also a word that's not really that clearly understood. So I think there's more work to do, but we're also at a time where people are really looking to do things differently in fashion. So I feel hopeful.
Well, I think that's why this is so important, right? You know, disrupting what does conscious consumerism really mean? Does sustainable consumerism even exist? And I think the answer to that probably is no. I suppose one element is, I think, focusing on single-use products and kind of eradicating those. But you know, there's also the broader issue of lifestyle products and everything that we have in our lives, and ensuring that those don't become delayed landfill as well. And it's really something that we talk about and think a lot about here at Ocean Bottle, is really ensuring that our products do stay in the loop, and really do make a positive impact. So I don't know, David, if you've got anything to add there as well, might be interesting from your angle.
Definitely echoing what Victoria said. It is that three-pronged approach. I think from a brand point of view, what we can do is educate, but also make sure that our products are truly recyclable. And this is the frustrating thing, is that there's so many people who say this is recyclable, and believe me, when you break things down and you look at components and cosmetics and what facilities are available to us for recycling and the lack of education, there's actually very little that is truly recyclable. It's crazy. So we have to partner with people like TerraCycle. We have to have packaging designed with them. So we have the experts in recycling telling us how to make a pump or a lid, and I mean, we still get it wrong, but I think this is what we can do as a brand. We can be almost like future-proof ourselves and go, the most important thing we can do right now is to make sure our products are fully recyclable where those facilities exist. And this is the caveat. And this is like where we start talking about policy and governments, because even in the UK, there's no standardization on recycling, and there's very little education on recycling. So for me, that's where we should be pushing. I think habits are changing. And as soon as you have that recycling, it's a simple thing, but as soon as you have that recycling bin in your bathroom, you will start to read the label, you'll start to know what goes in there, and then that kind of cascades to all other areas. Certainly in my life, this is what's been a big factor for me. But yeah, we need to be now looking up. How do we affect that policy? Like what are governments doing to enable us, you know, to recycle? Because it's really hard, and there's no silver bullet. But like even things like sachet samples in the cosmetic industry, there's billions of these little samples. You know, the little square ones you tear the corner off. They still exist in landfill somewhere. So we're going to be the first brand, to my knowledge, in the world who's launching I think it's aluminum. It's a sample product. It's like a deluxe size. You can actually turn the lid over, pop the lid in, reuse it, and it's fully recyclable in every country in the world. So we've actually gone to lengths to make sure that this exact pack you can fully recycle wherever you live in the world. So it's really just about like due diligence and putting the work in. And yeah, it's tough. It's tough. No silver bullet, but like, yeah, it starts with the habits, consumer habits, education, brands doing what they can, putting sort of that before profit. And then what do we do like from the top down? How does that look? And how can we affect that change? And also governments, can I just say, it's, you know, our government changes all the time. And one of the things that frustrates me and my partner is, you know, there's no overriding policy that goes, okay, politics go this way, politics go that way, but there should be something about the environment that's consistent throughout, like whoever's ruling our country or managing all these things. So there kind of needs to be like a standardization of things that look after our planet, if that makes any sense. That doesn't change every couple of years when our government changes, and you've kind of got to reset and start all that work over again. And that, I think, would make a big difference.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it needs to be standardized, because and companies have to cross their T's and dot their I's and do that due diligence and actually make sure that the solution that they're choosing is is the right solution, and that it doesn't just look good on paper from a sort of sustainability narrative through the current lens. I think it really has to be the right choice. So yeah, I think we could not agree more with that. I don't know, Mads, if you've got anything else to add there, or Wawa as well.
Yeah, sure. God, it's such a massive topic. And, you know, as I think Victoria said, this three-pronged approach is so essential. And to echo what David said, I am a massive believer in policy being such a priority, because at the end of the day, consumers going to consume, as Taylor Swift said, with haters going to hate. So there is always going to be a proportion of the population. And this is great because everyone is entitled to their own opinions and their own habits that will not shift their habits. And you know what? We don't need everyone doing it perfectly, but what we do need is the governments doing it perfectly. We don't have room and we don't have time left for governments to be committing to a target in 10 years' time and then reaching it as they did last year. We've missed air pollution targets, we've missed water pollution targets, we're missing climate targets, you know, and then what do? We push it back 10 more years. And as someone who's sat there driving through the rainforests of Borneo, watching them being deforested, watching palm oil plantations go through for hours and hours, seeing coral reefs bleach and die, watching sharks be dragged ashore and finned, watching fishermen throw dynamite in the water to fish, you know, like, it's so incredibly important that we have the top levels of society, government, putting regulations in place that stop these things from happening, because consumers are so powerful, don't get me wrong, in changing their habits. And I am, you know, I don't eat commercially fished fish. Like, I'm very careful with my plastic consumption. You know, everyone should be doing these things just because you're human. You know, you should be wanting to leave a good legacy for the generations that follow. But, you know, we need the support of the government. And this is where the other aspect of being a consumer comes in. And that is using your voice. People underrate the power that we have using our voices. Look at what happened after Blue Planet 2. So many plastic bans came in. Funnily enough, the UK only managed to ban very small items regarding straws and cotton buds and all that stuff. Whereas we have small island nations, can't remember if it was Tonga or Fiji, doing complete nationwide, you know, plastic bans and aiming to be the first plastic-free nation by, you know, it's the power for our government to act is there. They just don't want to do it because they're tied up with, you know, companies that don't have the same monetary alignments and that thing. I'm not going to go into conspiracy, but, you know, so yeah, I think using your voice is so underrated. It's so powerful. I mean, even this slacktivism that goes on when you just share petitions and sign petitions, it does work. As you can see with the Finspire Change petition against shark finning in the UK, there's currently loopholes in UK law about exporting shark fins. And, you know, over 100,000 people signed that. It ended up being debated in government. And, you know, we can create change being consumers, not just putting our money where our mouth is, because debatable on the weight if that will even be quick enough. But yeah, use your voice. Oh, and one more thing to add on that as well, in terms of being a consumer and ethical consumerism, I don't think that's very always inclusive. Definitely here in the Western world, where we have the luxury and the privilege of choice, but even within like my own community based here in London, not everyone can afford to go to the health food store and shop plastic free. Not everyone can afford these cosmetics companies that come, you know, I just bought a bottle of mouthwash last week. I bought it because it was £2, but it was reduced from £8 in an aluminium bottle. So, you know, the issue of privilege and sustainability again, and I'm sure Wawa can comment on this more than I can. You know, being a responsible consumer is so important for us, but also it's not viable for everyone. And there does need to be government action. Yeah, that's all from me.
Cool. I suppose if I was going to comment on that, I would say, yeah, I think what everyone else has said, which is every level counts. Individuals, company action, and government action. It really is that kind of like Oreo effect almost of the three layers. I mean, looking at the pressure that individuals are able to create on policy, like you said with Blue Planet, but I think also making sure that that voice continues to grow and expand and become even more diverse. So yeah, I think they're all probably difficult, equally important. But yeah, can agree more. I don't know, Wawa, did you have anything that you wanted to add at all to this?
I mean, I think everyone has said, facets of everything that I could say. Within the context of the American political system, I believe in policy straight up, but within the context of the US political system, I always say your politicians aren't necessarily supporting green legislation in the way that they need to. Let's vote them out and run for office. So I'm always a huge advocate for young people taking the time to lobby, as well as write letters, call offices. There are people that literally have to do that every single day as part of their jobs and have to pick up the phone. So there are people that are going to listen to you, as well as support people that are going to be supporting the policies that you feel like are necessary for the vitality of our planet. So vote and run for office.
Great. I think that's a really, really great answer. Can agree more. So yeah, I suppose that probably brings us on to the final thoughts then, because we're actually running slightly over time. Yeah, basically, if an individual was just beginning their sustainability journey, or would like to do more to help our Earth, the same as well for a company just sort of starting out on their journey, what would be your advice to that individual or that company? Just a quick fire around the room, 1 minute each.
I can go first. Quickly.
Yeah, go first. Yeah, perfect.
Before you talked about imperfect environmentalists, we don't need perfect environmentalists. We need imperfect environmentalists. We need people that just are invested and doing whatever they can at whatever range that they can to be better, learn more. And that's what we need. Be an imperfect environmentalist. Don't strive for perfection. It's not achievable. Do what you can, and that's the most important first step.
Demand change. Perfect. We'll go with David next.
Yeah, Wawa kind of stole mine because that's brilliant. I love that. I was just going to say also transparency. Just look for transparency and honesty. It's definitely not about being perfect, and I don't think any brand can stand up and say that they are. We certainly not, but we just strive to do better every day, and I think that is the tone we should all be trying to hit as humans, right? Take out some of the environmental stress, because we're all worried about it, but I think sometimes that can paralyze people, certainly people that aren't so educated, and that's the last thing we want. So yeah, be kind to yourself and be kind to the environment, but also, yeah, just do your own research, know your facts, look for brands that are as transparent as possible, I suppose.
Cool, and over to Mads.
Yeah, just to kind of echo what everyone else has said, we're not all perfect, we are all human, and I think it's just about being responsible with your own actions, using your voice, and learning. I think, yeah, probably my 3 things.
Perfect.
And I guess from my side, from a fashion point of view, it's as simple as buying less and buying better. I have a rule that really cuts out impulse buying. So if I see something that I like, or I've seen my favorite person dressed in something, and just thinking about fast fashion more generally, I save a photo, a screenshot on my phone. If I still love it in 2 to 3 weeks time, that's when I'll consider purchasing it, and it cuts down 90% of impulse buys. So anyone on this call who's looking to buy a June 21st outfit they'll probably never wear again, either rent it or keep it on your phone for 2 more weeks, and if you still want it, then consider purchasing it.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a perfect note to end. And what we say is always just be part of it. I think we need to get everyone to be part of this. So yeah, get involved basically. Whether you're just starting out or an absolute pro on sustainability, time's of the essence. So it can't wait. Thank you so much for joining, you amazing panelists. This was just a really, really great session, and I really hope the audience enjoyed it. Sorry we don't have time to run over, but hopefully more to come. I think we should do one of these every year. See how we're doing.
For sure. Thank you, Will.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it was amazing to be up here speaking alongside such an incredible panel. So yeah, thanks a lot, Will.
Yeah,
thanks so much for coming.
Thanks, Will.
Have a great day, evening. Bye.